Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start the session, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Atanwanadron, Neutral, Anishinabeg, and Haudenosaunee peoples. Wilfrid Laurier University and the Shepo Institute is situated on the Halimand Tract, land promised to 6 nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand Bend. Welcome to the Shepo Institute's annual Women's Seminar, Career Pathways for Women in STEM. Although science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the STEM fields, are widely regarded as critical to national economies, so far, we have not achieved gender equality, where women are still underrepresented in these fields. Moreover, the lack of visible, diverse STEM role models, particularly diverse women role models, who represent the breadth of career opportunities in STEM, is a key contributor to the skills shortages in these fields. Diverse role models inform, influence, inspire, and empower women and girls in STEM. Empowering and advancing women in STEM and leadership works towards closing the gender gap that has persisted at all levels of the STEM disciplines. Thus, it is my honor and pleasure to now introduce to you our 4 panelists, women leaders in STEM of Afro-Caribbean descent with engineering and chemistry backgrounds on this International Women's Day, who are committed to inspiring, empowering, and mentoring women and girls in STEM. Donna Myers is a capital projects practitioner with a focus on leading strategic consulting and delivering technology solutions that transform how capital projects are planned and executed across various industry sectors. She holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of West Indies, St. Augustine campus in Trinidad, and a master's in business administration from the University of Manchester in the UK. Donna maintains certification as a project management professional with the Project Management Institute, PMI, and is also a member of the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering International. Camille Batiste is a supply chain and procurement leader at Archer Daniels Midland Company. In this role, she leads supply chain strategy, including planning, delivery, and network improvement efforts, as well as non-commodity procurement for the company. Prior to ADM, she spent 20 years at Honeywell International in various roles of increasing responsibility across the end-to-end supply chain, serving most recently as the Vice President of Sourcing Operations for its aerospace business unit. Camille is a 6 Sigma Black Belt and also holds the Certified Professional in Supply Management, CPSM credential. She served as a member and chair of the Board of Directors of the Institute for Supply Management and currently serves on the White House National Infrastructure Advisory Council. She holds a Bachelor of Arts and Sciences in Chemical Engineering and Economics from Stanford University in Stanford, California, and an MBA from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Ruth Headlam Moore is a technical director in the alumina refinery industry with over 30 years of experience. Ruth specializes in strategic planning and execution, systems improvement, operational excellence, and quality management. She is deeply committed to mentorship and professional development, with a proven track record of nurturing young professionals into successful management roles. Her extensive industry experience includes working with refineries in Jamaica and the United States, as well as Australia, Spain, Suriname, and Brazil, while leading projects as a global technical manager with Alcoa's Global Aluminum Center of Excellence. Ruth holds a degree in chemical engineering from the University of West Indies St. Augustine campus in Trinidad. She furthered her education by obtaining her law degree, enriching her expertise, and gaining valuable insights from legal knowledge. Janice Crawford was a federal public servant for over 20 years and is now retired. She served in 1 agency and 2 departments, interpreting, applying, and drafting regulations. Her most recent responsibilities included being lead on the development, finalization, and approval of a federal regulatory package that came into force in January 2024, and lead on the regulatory review of existing regulations under the government's plan to modernize the country's regulatory system. Janice holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry major and Applied Chemistry minor from the University of West Indies, Mona, and an MBA in Finance from Nova Southeastern University, Florida. Ladies, welcome to this year's panel conversation. Let us jump right into our roundtable discussion. Could you share your journey and the factors that influenced your decision to pursue a career in sciences and engineering? And what challenges did you encounter along the way, and how did you overcome them?
Good afternoon, everybody, and happy International Women's Day. So my journey started in Jamaica. I was a student and I was very good in math and science and always excelled in that area. So of course, you should be an engineer. What else is there? There's nothing else to do. I think I chose engineering for several reasons. I had the aptitude for it. I had the ability, I had the interest, and I had pressure to be fair. So I started my journey in Jamaica. I went through high school in Jamaica, and then I went to Stanford for college. I went with the intention of majoring in engineering, and I chose chemical engineering because I asked two questions when I got there. The first question was, which engineers get paid the most coming out of school? And I was told it was chemical engineers. Maybe petroleum kind of had a little bit of a bump, but no interest there. And the next one was, which is the hardest one? I don't know. I was an idiot. So yes, I wanted the most challenging program that they had, and I wanted to make as much money as I could, which is why I chose chemical engineering. And it was a journey. It was a journey through college. I think changing cultures, changing country at the same time that you're challenging yourself academically was difficult. Sometimes it was the content was okay, but sometimes the language that we use in America to name different things were different. And so I was adjusting to a culture, adjusting to new ways of living, and trying to adjust to a different academic system. So I struggled at times in my academic journey. And the way that I was able to address that and really meet those challenges was to find my people. I was finding other Caribbean people in the community on campus who could share my perspective. And we, I guess misery loves company, but who understood, who could speak my language and understood what I was going through. So that was very helpful for me building that community, that clan, which is really helpful. In my career, and I'm one of the engineers or maybe the people on this call who maybe didn't stay in the true engineering line my entire career. We can talk about that in a minute. But in my career as an engineer, I was my first alumina refinery in 1994. I was the first female engineer they ever had. And they struggled. They didn't know what to do with me. They didn't know where to put me. It just, people almost stayed away because, oh, female engineer, I don't know what to do with her. And that was tough. But one of the things that I took advantage of is that expectations were low. And so maybe it's an expression, but I was able to take advantage of that and over-deliver. I think the other element that really helped me is that through high school, I thought school was okay. School was easy for me. Undergraduate engineering was not. And that's where I had to learn grit. I had to learn to stick with some things that maybe were difficult and I would ordinarily give up, but I was not going to give up. So I learned how to do that, and that has paid off very well in my career.
Thank you for that, Camille. Janice, we can go to you.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Dr. Cyrus, for considering me as a participant on this panel. I feel special to be participating in something of this nature on International Women's Day with such accomplished women, and also for the opportunity to have a conversation with our audience. So my journey, I don't know if I'd call it a journey, because a journey is usually something planned and has supposedly an expected outcome. I think of my journey as an adventure. It started when I was a child, when I heard the word molecule quite often, sitting in the back of my mother's classroom, waiting for her to take me home after school. For some reason, this word really fascinated me. But anyway, fast forward, I got to high school and learned what a molecule is in my science class. And from there, I just developed a love for the sciences. And then when it came on to the time that we had to specialize in our subject areas in high school, we had whom we considered a very terrifying chemistry teacher, but she was, in retrospect, an excellent teacher and mentor who just developed or helped develop my love and fascination, interest in chemistry. So I continued with chemistry through university, graduated with, as you mentioned earlier, a degree majoring in chemistry and with a minor in applied chemistry, which was basically analytical chemistry with some business training. So of course, then my interest in business subjects was stoked. I left university and went straight into being a paint chemistry at an international paint company in Jamaica. At which point, I don't remember if it was recommended or I happened upon this idea myself that I already had the basics chemistry. I should learn how to manage people who are in science. So I went on and I did a graduate diploma in management studies, and from there straight into an MBA. There was very little scope for advancement in the paint company because my then supervisor and I were pretty much the same age. And when I approached management for the opportunity to understudy someone, that wasn't welcomed, shall we say, because who is this brash young woman coming to ask to understudy a manager? She's more qualified than I am. So, no. Anyway, I left, did about a year at a building society because, of course, I was using my finance degree now, my MBA. But at that time, it was a very bad period for the financial industry in Jamaica. I saw the writing on the wall for this institution, so I left. Ended up as a teaching assistant at the university from which I graduated, and I really felt good about that. And I enjoyed being there, but again, unfortunately, there were no tenured positions. So I wanted something more. I heard then that Canada had a need for chemists. I applied as an independent professional, got through rather quickly, and migrated to Canada full of hopes and expected that within a week or two, I'd land my dream job. There are lots of jobs being advertised for chemists. Many of them, my profile suited almost perfectly, but I realized that I wasn't getting any responses when I applied. Anyway, to cut a long story short, there was a career fair being held at one of the convention centers in Toronto, or maybe the convention center in Toronto. I went full of hope in my little suit and my briefcase and my CVs, stepped in, and when I was being pre-screened, or when my CV was being pre-screened, the lady at the door, and then she stopped suddenly and looked at me and she said, "Well, you didn't study in Canada." I said, "No." And then and there, she shoved my CV back at me and said, "Go over to our manpower division and sign up to pack some boxes. You're a foreign trained professional. You'll never get a job in your field here." I was shocked. So I walked out, jumped on the bus. I had a long bus ride back to where I was living at the time. And on that journey, it came very obvious to me why I wasn't getting any responses to all those ads that I had responded to, because I was a foreign trained professional. So reality hit hard, but I wanted to make money. I didn't want to continue just sitting around searching for jobs to no avail. So the following Monday, I went down to the manpower division and I signed up. I did a digital literacy and numeracy tests, which I passed. And then I had to undergo women's training, which is workplace hazardous communication system in Canada. So I did the test, passed it, and the irony about this is that a few years, no, maybe more than a few years, about 8 years later, I ended up being one of the officials who administered the women's program and contributed to the change from women's 1988 to women's 2015. But that was 8 years in the future. I didn't know what would happen then. So all in all, there were many challenges, and as Camille mentioned, learning to do things differently from what I'd been used to or how I'd been used to doing them in the Caribbean was interesting. I had several experiences that were I took as teaching moments or weeks, and there was a lot of heartache, but I overcame the challenges I faced as a foreign trained professional by being very persistent. And I set out to be very good at my job, because when you're good at your job, there are very few questions that will come your way. And if you're credible and people know they can come to you and be assured that they'll be getting what they need to know about that area, well, it goes a long way. So that in a nutshell was my journey slash adventure and overcoming challenges.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you for that. I will hand over to Donna.
Sure. I really appreciate being here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and happy International Women's Day, everyone. So my journey after high school, I completed a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And the funny thing is, I actually went to study chemical engineering. That was what I was accepted for. But after first year, doing all the breadth of courses that were on offer, I just fell in love with the subject area for civil engineering. And so I switched. But the reason I decided to study engineering in the first place was, similar to Camille, I was already on the science and math track coming out of high school. And I was really fascinated with the idea of studying engineering. It just seemed like a cool thing. And secondly, I knew that there was, good potential for a decent starting salary when I completed the program. So then after university, the job that really kickstarted my career was with a resources company in the mining industry in Jamaica. And that's basically where I grew up career-wise. I was hired as a plant engineer, and then I moved to the capital projects group as a project engineer, and then eventually I ended up managing projects. I really learned some really valuable lessons along the way. I was exposed to the entire project life cycle, all the way from, conception all the way through to engineering, procurement, construction, commissioning. And I was also exposed to a variety and scale of projects that were needed to sustain the operations. And while I was busy honing my skills in project management, I was also starting a family. And at some point, I was also completing an MBA. So when we decided to migrate to Canada, I knew that for me to continue work as a project manager, it would be important for me to have some kind of internationally recognized credential. So I certified as a project management professional with the Project Management Institute. So that was major transition number one, moving to Canada and moving into a new job. I was fortunate in that in my job in Jamaica, I had made quite a few contacts. So I had a wide professional network. And so I started knocking on doors. And fortunately for me, because I had a track record of working with some of these professionals, I ended up in a consulting firm that offered engineering, procurement, and construction management services. I was working as a project manager there. And since the clients that we served were similar to the operations that I had worked for, I was able to transfer a lot of my previous work experience to that new role. But then I also gained so much knowledge in the leading practices that are used to implement like really huge mega projects. You know, the technology solutions that were being used and how huge volumes of project data were handled. Now that last one, the project data, I really fell in love with that because like I'm just a math geek at heart, right? Then came transition number 2. I moved into management and technology consulting, right? Where I help companies to transform how they organize to deliver capital projects. So then again, I had to build new skills because now I'm delivering IT projects. And how I came into management and technology consulting was again through my network. And so this was basically building on everything that I had done up to this point, all the knowledge that I had, understanding what clients and operations needed to execute their projects, and then basically being able to deliver the technology solutions to help them manage those projects better. So in addition to that, I also had to learn to code, right? There were some software solutions that were what we call best of breed in certain of the functional areas. And there was one in particular that clients were asking for. So, and I really loved that. It was just a new area that fascinated me. And I actually, ended up really liking it. So that in a nutshell is the story of my career journey so far. In terms of the challenges that I encountered, the main one I think was balancing family commitments with career aspirations, particularly in the early years, right, when the kids are young. It's trying to figure out how to prioritize their health and happiness without stagnating your own career, or to put it another way, how could I pursue my career aspirations without sacrificing their well-being? So I had to make compromises to balance it too. Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you for that. And I will hand over to Ruth now.
All right, thank you. Like everyone else, I want to thank Karen and the rest of the panel for the opportunity to be here, and happy International Women's Day to everyone in the audience and also on the panel, of course. In terms of my journey, there's a lot of similarities in what has already been said in terms of, why did I end up choosing engineering? But it really started, there were 2 major influences on my part. It really started, a basic part was that maths and science and were in school, they were actually the topics that I understood the most. It was much easier for me to relate to, understand, and enjoy those subjects rather than history and geography and poetry and all those things, right? So that was kind of an easy transition. Another major factor for me was really my mother. My mother was a teacher, a high school teacher, and one of the things that allowed is that just growing up, there was always from her the influence of, I guess, similar to Janice, you always have that additional bits of information as to, why this looks like that, what it is. You grew up with all of these specimens in the house, encyclopedias, and it really just kind of engendered an interest in going into that route. And of course, having her there, whenever I've met upon any kind of difficulty, up to a point, she was able to help. And very instrumental in kind of engendering and steering me into that path. So it actually was almost like a seamless transition for me, in the sense that there was this natural tendency towards the STEM subject, but then also having that atmosphere at home actually helped. In terms of my career, chemical engineering in particular, I'm not sure I was as targeted as Camille in terms of doing the research, but I'm sure somewhere along the line that came into being. I did, I guess, chemistry, chemical engineering again, because of the chemistry and the thinking that somehow they should have been related, right? And I actually did, I think for me, looking back, it actually was a great fit, a good choice. I went to the University of the West Indies, where I was a year or so behind Donna, right? Who was, a really great support for me there. And University of Western is that whole transition doing chemical engineering, it really helped you to build certain characteristics that really help you later on in terms of your tenacity, your determination. You had to be determined in that type of atmosphere to kind of get through sometimes. And it really, it's really some of the characteristics, you know, as you go on in your career that you really do need at times to be able to make it through. On graduating, I joined the alumina industry. I'm going to say joined because I've been with them since that time. And I started out initially in Jamaica. I did eventually migrate to Canada and continued working in the industry in a different sort of way. I'll explain that in a little bit. But the whole thing though is that in terms of the challenges that I think that, you know, a lot of us face, really two things: the whole work-life balance, particularly with a young family. I have two daughters, right? And just initially being able to maintain that balance. The industry tends to absorb a lot. It absorbs you, right? It's one of those jobs that really, you don't get there at 9 and leave at 5. It kind of continues with you a lot of times. And, you know, being able to at some point recognize that work-life balance, I think, was a major challenge, you know, to sort of ensure that my daughters and my family were able to actually be a family, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is, you know, in terms of moving to Canada, moving away is actually always a bit of a challenge. Moving to Canada, I think, is an added challenge because of the way it's made up. And, you know, we think about it, there's so many people coming from everywhere. They do question your credentials. And the bottom line, though, is fortunately in my particular case, I was fortunate that based on the experiences and my successes at the plant that I was at in Jamaica. In moving to Canada, I stayed with that company within a different role. I left as a technical manager, and then when I went to Canada, I stayed with the company but as a global technical manager. So what that meant is that whereas in Jamaica I was a location technical manager with just one plant, as a global technical manager, I was now basically working through 9 different plants all over the globe. So did that for quite a bit and then moved into consulting and then came back to another refinery. That's why I said I graduated into the industry. Came back to another refinery where I'm the technical director currently. A key thing Janice said is basically being good at what you do. You know, you're recognized when you're really good at what you do, right? And it's really so easy for us to be good at what we do, right? And of course, being determined, you know, that's really a really key thing. So just in a nutshell, you know, those are a few things from my particular path. Lots of similarities, little differences.
Well, thank you for that, Ruth. Thank you for that, ladies. I will move on to the next question. How do you navigate, and I know all of you have touched on this a little bit, how do you navigate and overcome gender biases or stereotypes in the male-dominated fields that you work, and what strategies would you recommend to other women facing similar challenges? Let's see, Janice, you want to kick us off on that one?
Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, I worked in an environment where we routinely underwent mandatory training on overcoming biases and being neutral. That being said, though, there were times when a remark or two, whether intentional or not, would reveal a bias or some level of stereotyping. For example, a comment like, women aren't usually interested in insert area here, so I'll take the lead on this. Or when I have been given a lead, it would be like, are you sure this isn't too much for you? I can help. Because working in the field of regulations, it requires some real heavy lifting. And I mean, in terms of technical knowledge and reading, and regulations are not the easiest thing to read and interpret. So my way of handling these biases, intentional or not, I never acknowledge them by speaking about them. I just made certain that this person or these persons came to realize that she knows what she's doing. She doesn't need any help. Actually, I am the one now asking her questions. And then they tended to retreat. And again, it all comes back. What would I recommend to other women facing similar challenges? It comes back to knowing your job well, being professional, being consistent. Keep yourself open to learning new things. Never take it for granted that because you've been doing this for a long while, that you know everything. Second guess yourself. There's nothing wrong with being confident, but don't be overly confident. I sometimes am obsessive with checking and rechecking because nobody likes to look stupid in front of others in a meeting or at any time. So again, be consistent, know your job, learn, always learn. Also be curious. And then for the people who may try to discredit or undermine you, I always say take the high road. Always leave them an out so they can retreat with some amount of dignity. I mean, you can laugh to yourself afterwards, but take the high road after you have shown them that, hey, I am okay. And if you do need their help, don't be embarrassed to ask for the help or to solicit their help. But always, always put yourself in a position that you know what you are doing and that those around you know that. Your knowledge is seen, known, and respected.
Thank you for that, Ms. Janice. Donna, do you want to go next for us?
So I agree with what Janice said. And the thing, though, is so much gender bias is unconscious that you're sometimes not even sure if that's what you're experiencing. For instance, if your boss is repeatedly asking you to work on some boring, unpleasant tasks that the men don't want to do because they're not high profile enough, is your boss really asking you because it's the best thing for your career or because he knows you won't say no and you'll get it done? I think sometimes as women, we have this misplaced sense of loyalty to take one for the team that can sometimes get in the way of our personal ambitions. So trying to identify gender biases is so nuanced, and I didn't want to call it out if that's not what it was, right? I didn't want to become like the boy who cried wolf and derail my career even before it started. Yeah, was I reading too much into the situation? And it was only when I felt I could answer that question for myself that I was able to speak up when I thought I needed to. And even then, sometimes you think long and hard before, right? You pick your battles. So what I would say to anybody who might find themselves in a similar situation, as Janice said, you are in the job first and foremost because you're qualified and you merit that position. And sometimes as a new hire, it might be hard for you to tell if you're being overlooked because you aren't being confident enough or if it's because you're a woman. The best thing to do is to become the kind of person who won't be overlooked. That means investing in yourself, developing your soft skills, your writing skills, your speaking skills. Do the kind of work that you'll be proud to put on your resume. And if you do good work, no one can take that away from you. And then once you learn to be confident in that, then it becomes easier for you to advocate for yourself. I would also say don't downplay your opinions and your contributions. If humility is something that you value, then there's no need to become a braggart, like if that makes you uncomfortable. But don't ever diminish the contributions that you make. And if there is I've worked in organizations where you have an employee resource group for women. And I find, those groups so helpful because there you can find allies and you have a voice. It's one way of bringing others along to change the status quo so that other women who are coming up don't have to go through what you went through. And I would say if you're in an organization that doesn't have a women's employee resource group, like find out what the policies are and consider forming one, right? Sometimes it's helpful in a forum like that to have an objective opinion on situations that you're unsure about, just to make sure that it's not your imagination. Yeah, that's what I would add to that.
Thank you, Donna, for your insights. And Ruth, you want to continue the conversation for us?
Of course. All right, so one thing I want to add to what has already been said is that one thing that's really important is, and again, you're going to hear, I guess, these themes coming up a lot, is that you really have to become the best at what you do, and you have to be confident. You have to be confident in your abilities. You have to be confident that you're capable. You have to be confident at whatever stage you are, that whatever you're handling, you can do it, and you need to deliver on that. Yeah, and it's really important that at that stage, you don't let external expectations or external comments drive or influence your decision once it's sound. Once you have decided that this is how I'm going to go, don't let a voice or someone expressing some type of dissent or questioning, don't let that. Once you're there and you have your facts and you're sure, right? I'm not saying don't act until you have 100%, but know that you're pretty much sure. Don't allow external voices to come in and change your path. In fact, in the matter, I know when I started out in the industry, I was actually the first female engineer, I think chemical engineer in my department. And today, interestingly, in terms of you'll find very often in a lot of the organizations that I work, you actually have a whole lot more female engineers, to the point where sometimes it's a higher percentage, but the gender biases still exist. It still exists. It's still there. And as you go up, you actually see it as you go up in the organization and in management, you kind of become aware of certain things. And the bottom line, though, is that you as a professional have to be pretty much strong where that is concerned. Another in terms of a strategy, one of the things that's important is that you have to establish boundaries. You have to understand what boundaries exist, what boundaries you are comfortable working with, and you have to consistently maintain those boundaries. If those boundaries are breached for whatever reason, you need to speak up. And I'm not talking about in a confrontational way. That's never the way. But you do have to speak up whenever boundaries cross. That the fact of the matter is that, just like anything else, people are testing boundaries and recognize that they can actually do this and they will continue to do it. And if it makes your functioning any less, that's something that is, it's really important that you very early on, make it clear that, as a professional, you're not comfortable with, whatever it is. You need to make sure that those boundaries are clear. You need to be consistent with those boundaries, and you need to speak up whenever those boundaries are breached. The other thing I want to mention, I think it's really important that we have or seek out female mentors, females in the same profession, similar profession, or anyone who has gone through a similar type of possible challenges that you can seek guidance from and kind of get use as a sounding board. And sometimes these biases are a little bit mute sometimes, and you're unsure, and unfortunately, it is one of these things sometimes where you have to pick your battles, right? But the bottom line, though, is that it does help to actually have that resource, that female mentor, that female companion who can relate to your experience and who can actually give you some sound guidance and wisdom, whenever a situation arises that you're unsure of or uncomfortable with. So those are just a couple of the strategies that I'd probably mention.
Thank you for that, Ruth. Camille?
Hey, and I realized as I was listening to some of the other introductions that I didn't finish mine. So I'm going to finish it and tell a couple of stories as I go along. So I was an engineer for about 5 years, both in the mining industry as well as in specialty chemicals. From there, I moved into IT, actually implementing SAP for a couple of years. And from there, moved into procurement, supply chain, both on the chemical side of the Honeywell business, then the aerospace side. And then when I moved to ADM, I came to ADM to lead global procurement, and now I own procurement as well as global supply chain. I say all those things to say that, I'm one of the engineers that took a different path. moved outside of engineering into something else, but I always leverage that engineering background the way that I think. And the best part of being an engineer who's not in an engineering field is that I can't get the wool pulled over my eyes as a non-engineer by engineers. So it's always good to be able to say, no, I understand what you're talking about. But with regard to the question, my experience, I don't know that if I have experienced gender bias, I would say that there's sometimes when I feel like the expectations from me were low. And I didn't know they were low until I just did normal work and people were shocked. So I realized that they were low, but it actually worked out to my advantage because, I came out as an A player, as a superstar, because I came out delivering superstar quality work when, came in with an A when the expectation was a C. And so I think, one of the things that's important, and I think that the other ladies have shared this about being good at your job, excellence is a non-negotiable for us. In all these things that we're talking about, you just have to have the understanding that we have to be very good. We have to be the ones that know what's going on, or dotting every I and crossing every T. That's just expected. And so I've learned to leverage the low expectations to deliver more. Of course, the expectations grow, but continuing to deliver excellence is always required. When I think about gender biases and maybe there was one story though, when maybe I said maybe not so much a gender bias in terms of my ability, but I did have a couple of occasions where a manager just assumed that I wouldn't want a position, I wouldn't want a promotion, or I wouldn't want to move because I had a family. And this happened behind closed doors, right? At one point, let me make that decision. Maybe I didn't, but bring the opportunity to me. Don't hide it from me and don't make the assumption that I'm not going to move because I have a child. And I think so. That's an element of gender bias. It has nothing to do with your capability, but there's assumptions made about how you want to live your life. There are 3 points that I would make in terms of advice as you're thinking about gender bias. The first one is sometimes you just need to ignore it. Sometimes giving these things air amplifies something that doesn't need to be amplified. You just walk around doing your job and doing it well. Okay, that's how you're going to address the bias. You just do a great job. So sometimes when I think I said we don't let external voices speak into you. Sometimes we have to ignore those voices or even ignore the assumptions and just go about doing the job and not let that bother you. So again, not all the time. Sometimes you have to call it out. But when you're not really sure, blow it off and do the job that you were called to do. The second one is, people say people don't leave companies, they leave bosses or they leave managers. I think that there's the flip side of that is that we get to choose our manager. And when I say that, what I mean is you choose the organization that you look to work for. So if you're in school and you're thinking about where you want to work, look at those companies that are recruiting, look at companies that are specifically recruiting women engineers or women scientists. Look at companies that have a diverse board of directors, companies that have a diverse leadership team. That tells you something about how they view women in the business. And you can then choose those companies. And so we avoid maybe some of those that haven't quite made it to the 21st century. And we work for those companies that really value what we bring as women engineers. The third point I would say is the story I tell behind that is that my husband and I, we move a lot. And every time we move, we're trying to find a new place of worship. And they're usually not very diverse where we live. And so I used to say to him, well, we are the diversity. So we need to be the change you want to see. And so I say that in the context of in my role in the company as a leader, people look to me. They're looking to me as leadership that can speak on behalf of women in the organization. It means that I am in the room when decisions are being made about other people and assumptions are being made about other people. And as women in leadership, we sometimes have to be the ones to speak out and call things out when we see that there's bias against somebody else in the organization. So we need to be those sponsors too of younger women coming up in the organization. What gives me hope is that what I see now in this new generation of young leaders, they got it. They got it. I have as in our company, we have this program where an executive sponsors a plant that has safety issues, and we partner them with another plant that is better at safety than they are. In this particular case, one of the safety issues had an older gentleman. He'd been the plant manager for the last 20 years. And his mentor plant was run by an energetic, smart, fantastic young lady who looks, I don't know how old she is, looks like she's probably in her late 20s, just killing it. I mean, when she talked about what they're doing at the plant and their productivity and their safety record and their quality record, I was like, you go, girl. And this young lady, I don't know, I mean, she didn't maybe have the issues that we had back in the 20th century or 20 years ago. She's coming in and I was like, yeah, I'm going to run this plant. I'm going to do the best job I can. And I'm going to deliver. And I love to see that. So I wish that this generation, that kind of confidence, and keep it up, because man, we're gonna do great things going forward.
Camille, thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's good to hear of the young ladies coming up with so much energy in the field. That is amazing. So I'm going to jump into the next question, and that is, what unique perspectives and contributions do you believe female scientists and engineers bring to the field? And how do those perspectives enrich the community in terms of scientific research, innovation? And are there any personal experiences about this or perspectives that you have brought to the company that you would like to share with us? And I will get Donna to kickstart us on that question.
Sure. So I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective. So last month, when we were celebrating Black History, I was reading about Marie Van Britten Brown, right? And she's a Black woman who designed and patented the first known home security system with video surveillance. And this was in the US in the 1960s, right? She worked the night shift as a nurse, and she was scared because of the rising crime in her neighborhood in New York. And her husband was an electronics technician, and so she tapped into his knowledge to complete the design. I think the design was ahead of its time. The technology hadn't yet caught up. So at the time when she patented it, the technology wasn't available to build it so that it could be an affordable solution. But nonetheless, this is to her credit. And it was really her fear for her family that was the catalyst for this innovation. So when I was reading her story, it made me think about the concept of human-centered design. And the human-centered design approach is used extensively across industries in product innovation, service design, creative problem solving. It's not a new concept, right? But it's very topical, especially in the management and technology companies that I work in. And the idea with human-centered design is that you cultivate and you foster empathy, right? So that you can really design products and services that will improve people's lives, and that your designs will remain relevant for them, right? Only when you step into a person's shoes and really understand them, can you design with their needs in mind. And I think that Marie was practicing human-centered design, whether she was familiar with the concept or not. I would like to think that she was operating with that innate instinct to protect her family, right? Something you cannot do if you don't have empathy. And that is what I think women bring to the table. We know how to empathize. Secondly, I want to say, who better to represent the interests of women in scientific research and innovation than other women? For the longest time, women's health issues were diminished. Some of it was even written off as hysteria. A lot of research was done on men, and then it was generalized to women. For instance, it was only in the late 90s and early 2000s that it was realized that the symptoms of stroke in women look different from it does in men. Just this morning, I was listening to a panel discussion on the radio, and someone brought up the pink tax, where there are some products that are marketed especially to women. They're more expensive than the same products marketed to men. We need to address this inequity. And finally, I would say, as a case for more women being involved in research and innovation, yes, STEM is a highly technical field, but I don't think there's enough credit given to soft skills. And as women, I think that's what we bring to the table, right? We know how to collaborate well with others. We can build consensus. We can get buy-in. In general, we're willing to admit that we don't know everything, but we can pull a team together to get the job done, with people with different skills, strengths that we don't have. And we have, a few of the panelists spoke about this earlier. We have this stick-to-itiveness, this tenacity that makes us see things through to completion. And I think that that's what we bring to the table in terms of research and innovation.
Thank you for that, Donna. Ruth, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to add to just really add to what Donna has said. I think one of the things that the female professional, female scientist brings to the table, to any team actually, is one, their sense of their tenacity and their determination. But more importantly, they have as female, I've in terms of just looking over time, the female professional tends to bring with them two things that kind of makes them perform at a different level. One of it is the attention to detail, right? The attention to detail that that normally accompanies any work, any output that comes from two approaches to a similar problem. That together with a results-oriented, it's almost like a default results-oriented approach that actually leads to oftentimes the creation of an extremely innovative set of solutions. It leads to, and in terms of coming up with innovations, solutions based on not necessarily the common run-of-the-mill approach, but coming up with something brought from a different point of view. And that is really enabled by the fact that you're really looking at it at a different level. And that's something that I have noticed a lot with the young female professionals that I've worked with over time. Another thing is, Donna mentioned there is almost a default to a more collaborative approach, a team building, which actually also helps to make any team, any workplace, any unit operation stronger. The whole idea about together we're going to get this done, and we're going to basically try and pull everyone in. There is a tendency for young female professionals to kind of use that approach to try and work things out. And again, it just makes the whole system stronger, when you get everyone involved. Those are two of the things, without getting into a whole lot, those are two of the things that I think are earmarked for young female professionals, and it really does make a difference to the outcome of an individual.
Thank you for that, Ruth. Camille, I will hand over to you.
I could just say ditto, ditto, and ditto. Yeah, I was learning a lot both from Donna and Ruth. Maybe the one thing I would add, there's a book out there by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. And as I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking about this question. I really said, a woman kind of brings a perspective of the customer and perspective of, and the book is called Start With Why. And sometimes of course, we're generalizing here, but, I think when guys are trying to solve a problem, it's about the what. Here's what we're going to do. We have a problem. Okay, we're going to do this, and they jump in to solve it. And it's usually the woman in the room who comes back and says, well, let's go back to what problem are we trying to solve again? Why are we doing this? Who is impacted by this? What do we need to consider? It's all the things that seem peripheral when you really dig deep into the details too soon, to always kind of anchor back to the purpose. And we bring the purpose back to the problem solving. That's the only thing I would really add to everything else that's already been said.
Thank you for that. And we'll round it up with Janice.
Thank you. So, female scientists have a different perspective simply because we are a separate gender. Each gender has its own experiences and perspectives, and these will influence the type of contribution made. So this different female perspective does have implications, and for this reason, our contributions need to be counted. Now, without our perspectives and contributions, science would be very limited and possibly limiting, and there'd be less understanding of how women are affected in all aspects of life, and maybe not just women, everyone. And having female scientists around or in existence, this acts as a source of encouragement and information for young women who might be interested in pursuing a career in the STEM arena, thereby building an even larger force of women in STEM. And yeah, just put that on top of what everybody else said. That's my contribution.
Thank you, Ms. Janice. Thank you for that, ladies. And I will move on to the next question, which is, what advice or insights would you offer to other women considering pursuing careers in the STEM fields abroad? And how would they leverage their unique backgrounds and experiences to thrive in these careers that encompass a new cultural context? And I know some of you had already touched on that when you were talking and answering with question one. And Ruth, would you like to kick us off on that one?
Okay. In terms of an advice or insight that I'd offer to women considering this STEM career, the first thing I'd have to say is that it really starts with a mindset, right? You do have to, one, of course, we've said this before, believe in yourself, be confident. But the other thing is, you have to approach by focusing on not the fact that it's new or unknown or it's changed, but really it's an opportunity for learning and growth, right? Well, when you get to later on in life and you start reflecting back on all of the different things that you've gone through, you will recognize that each and every one of these paths, even if it's a path that you chose or it's a path that you inadvertently ended up in, it actually is an opportunity for learning and growth, right? And if you actually start off with that mindset that here it is, I'm currently moving to be it abroad, or even a new industry, a new company, it basically then allows you to do two things. One, know that you're an asset, right? Your background, you're coming in with a unique you're coming in with your own uniqueness, the way that you do things, the way that you see things, the way that you approach things. Janice just mentioned just the gender differences, it did imply that, you tend to go into a whole lot more detail. Sometimes you need to know a whole lot more before you even, decide to move. But the bottom line though is that firstly, you need to know that you're an asset, right? You need to recognize that you're bringing in these skills and that you, through those skills and your experiences, you can contribute, you can actually add to an organization. Yeah, also have to be willing to learn, be willing to listen. As you're going to somewhere new, and this is not just for women, this is just in general. A lot of times we're tempted to go in and try to do things our way, right? You're going to end up a lot of times, unless you really understand the lay of the land and understand how things work and recognize you can influence, but unless you're in a position where you can change, you probably need to spend a little time to understand how things are done so that you can be very targeted and very strategic in in how you do things and your output and whatever it is that you try to change. So just having that mindset, having that confidence, knowing that you're an asset, knowing that you're bringing something to the table, and then knowing how to apply it are really, two or three key things. And then we've said this before, the whole thing about mentorship, right? It really, really does help to be able to latch on to, mentor within the organization that can help you to navigate some of these unknowns. So yeah, just very quickly, I'm sure there are lots of other things to be added from the other ladies on the group.
Wonderful. And on that note, I will move to Camille to continue the conversation.
I had 3 points, and I think Drew probably covered all three. I think, first of all, is listening and learning. When you're entering a new culture, it's important to take a step back. And yes, you're bringing yourself, and you will, but to understand, right, how things are done here, whether it's a new company or a new country. It's important because you're becoming part of a new community, and they need to, they need to understand. They need to know that you understand them. And then in terms of the cultural acclimation, if you will, finding mentors who have walked that path before. So if it's about a different country, finding people who have, entered that country before, understand how things work, right? Can know how to get things done and learn from other people. The second one, and we've said it this entire time, excellence, excellence, excellence. And that cannot be understated at any time, that we have to deliver every single time. And then the last one, I would say, there's that term, bring your whole self, right? Bring all of your womanness right? New people are brought into an organization for their diverse perspective. Share the perspective. To come in and not share who you are, not share what you know, defeats the purpose. And so be open about who you are, be big in yourself. Having listened and learned, then certainly bring all of your expertise and personality to bear.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Camille. And I will go to Janice. You want to a few insights?
Thank you. So again, ditto. You have to be open-minded and always curious. Always take that opportunity to learn something new or learn more about what you already know. So not because you're used to doing things a particular way, it doesn't mean that even though it's the same field, the same area, it doesn't mean that things will be done the same way in this new environment. There may be cultural, economic, and other differences that influence how things are done in other societies. And as well, your curiosity will open you to new learning opportunities that might not necessarily be formally expressed or shown to you. I worked in an environment that is a very, very different environment from the private sector that I was coming from. So as Ruth said, you learn the culture of the organization, check out the lay of the land, conform, learn, excellence, do your job well, and just again, be open-minded. I dare say that SANS is the same everywhere. What may differ is the context in which and how the laws of SANS are applied from one environment to another. So the basics that you've learned will apply. So use your scope of understanding and your life experience to find a way to help you to learn and adapt and bring your uniqueness to the table. Because of course, we learn by the process through which we break things down according to our life experience and our culture. So even if your perspective doesn't resonate with others, it likely will help you when you're working with multidisciplinary teams or multicultural teams. So again, open-mindedness, curiosity, and bring your own little flavor to help you to understand, break things down so that you can understand, so you can work effectively within your new environment, whether it's overseas or in a new company.
Thank you for that, Janice. Donna, I will pass it over to you.
Yeah, so just 2 quick points I would add. I agree with what everybody has said. To add to that, firstly, just be willing to expand your view of how you see your personal brand. Sometimes as women, we don't realize our full potential, and we may have not just our technical skills, but we also have other transferable skills, right, that we can leverage. And sometimes we may not get to do exactly what we want, what we did before, but there are other adjacent careers that could be just as fulfilling. So look at your brand, expand your view of that. And the other thing I would say is when you have an opportunity to, then create space for competent women who may be starting out on similar journeys.
So I'll move on to the next question, which is related actually to the question that you have just answered. And that is, how do you navigate cultural differences and potential language barriers, especially the language barriers in your scientific work? And what strategies have you found effective in fostering communication and collaboration within diverse research teams and workplaces? And I will get Camille to kick us.
Preface my comments that I don't necessarily work in scientific fields anymore. When I think about language barriers, though, I think about cross-functional language barriers, right? So I'm in supply chain, so I speak the language of supply chain. And I'm talking to somebody in finance, they speak their own language, and somebody in R&D speaks a different language. But I found if I want to foster collaboration, I have to speak the same language. I have to speak the language of my customer, or I have to speak the language of the hearer of my message. And the story I'll tell there is, if you're traveling in a foreign country and you don't speak the language, and then you hear somebody in the distance speaking your language, just think of the way you feel. And I tell my team, that's how our customers and stakeholders feel when we speak in their language. When we speak into finance person, we're talking about money. We're talking to R&D folks who talk about the science. And so as we are working across culturally, it's just important to really try to understand the other person, how they think, how they communicate, and try to communicate in the way that they can receive it.
That. And I will ask Donna if we can go next.
Sure. So another dimension, I think, to cultural differences that we encounter a lot is, we're working with teams where you have people of different generations, right? So I have led teams where you have a mix of generations. You have Gen Z, Gen X, you have millennials, right? And there are differences in how they communicate and how they use technology. So that's something that we have to be mindful of as well. And I have found it really useful to try and embrace, particularly, with the Gen Z team members, it's to embrace and understand them. And when they see you make the effort to do that, it really goes a long way. I would also say learn to recognize like the different personality types for your team members. There are some team members who may exhibit more introverted behavior. They need to a quiet place to take away problems so that they can, work it out and then come back and contribute. Where you may have more extroverted team members where, they need to be in a room bouncing ideas off each other. That's their process. So it's important for you to know under what conditions you're most effective, and then what conditions your teammates need to be successful. I think that goes a long way. And we spoke about this already, practicing empathy, creating an environment of psychological safety where people feel free to speak up without fear of humiliation. In terms of the language barriers, of course, like just practice active listening, I think. Make sure that people know that you understand them and vice versa. As a team lead, I have found it really useful, like to repeat key messages to make sure it's understood, and document, just write things down that are important, like key decisions. And then, of course, like visual representations, right? Like that's our stock in trade as scientists, right? Flowcharts and diagrams, like things that will make the communication easier. So those are some of the things I would call out.
Thank you for that, Donna. Janice.
Yes, this is a bit outside of the box, navigating cultural differences. I find that food is a bit of a leveler. Everybody can talk about what they like to eat, and somehow, I don't know why, my conversation somehow end up in food. So I ask people, what is it that you eat in your country? Do you have a recipe? And I'm embarrassed to say I have a huge recipe collection that I'll not live long enough to ever cook any of these things. I think the pleasure is just in collecting the recipes and not actually making them. I find that this is such an effective icebreaker, barrier breaker, because it relaxes everybody. We can all talk about food. I don't deliberately go in using this as a strategy, but somehow it happens. So after that, things tend to flow a lot more easily. Yeah, that's it. And in terms of language barriers, whether it is a different language, cultural language, a different area, I believe it was Donna who said it. And sorry if it wasn't Donna. Listening, it's very important to listen carefully and be patient. I learned this from one of my earlier supervisors. If you take the time to listen and you're patient, you understand so much more. Collaboration, as Donna said, have a safe space. People should be able to speak what it is they think, what they believe, without any fear of being told that that's a stupid question or that doesn't make any sense, because they said it because it meant something to them. So yeah, that's how I do it. Food and listening.
Thank you for that. And Ruth, I will pass it over to you.
Okay. In terms of navigating cultural differences and potential language barriers, I'll start with, as it relates to cultural differences, one of the things that's really important is one, take the time to learn cultural background and norms and wherever it is that you're going or wherever it is that you've landed, wherever it is that you are. I'm going to give an example, kind of extreme, but just to tell you. So I used to travel a lot initially when I was there as a part of COE. So you go to Brazil, you go to Texas. When you go to some of these places, you need to understand, for instance, what are some of the gestures that are okay in certain countries that are not in other countries, right? Because you'd very easily offend someone when you're thinking you're saying hi and you're actually not, or you're thinking you're saying okay, but you're not actually saying okay, right? So it's really, really, really very important that you kind of take the time to understand the culture that you're in, that you can actually respect that culture and, not find yourself in a situation where you're unintentionally offended someone. Another thing, just another simple example. The two of the plants I used to operate at, one was in Brazil, one was in Point Comfort in the US. And in Brazil kind of have a similar thing to like Jamaican time. So if you have a meeting at 8:30, it's guidance, 8:30 plus or minus, right? But at Point Comfort, it was really weird. If you had a meeting set up, their time's a little different, but if you had a meeting set up for 7, by 5 minutes to 7, everybody would be in that room and seated. And if you're not there, they're actually offended by the fact that you're wasting their time. So it's really important that you don't end up inadvertently offending someone by just not understanding what their cultural norms are, what their cultures are, right? So that's one of the things. And then, in terms of the actual language thing, one of the things that I used to do, one of the techniques that I'd use is, obviously I'd slow down my speech a lot. I wouldn't speak as quickly as I normally do. I'd try to just make sure that they understand, and I'd kind of maybe speak at 3/4 the rate that I normally do. And as much as possible, Camille said, avoid jargon that's nonsensical to the persons that you're speaking with. So, if I go in and I'm saying, oh, what's a TDF, right? Here, everybody will be like, what are you talking about? And you really do lose people. And, sometimes when you've lost the message, you've lost them. I guess the other thing too, and Donna mentioned, is the whole thing about written documents, writing, putting things in writing. It helps later on particularly if you're in a second language, in a country where English is a second language, having that document later on for reference or an email or so, literally helps. And then lastly, one of the things that we do wherever we went to a new culture is that we always had icebreakers. And it was really, we had a team working together. We go to Australia, no matter where you go to, Australia, Spain, one of the first things we did is to have this little icebreaker to just kind of get everybody to kind of recognize we're all people here, right? And it really does help with actually getting the group to perform. You go through these different stages. So those are a couple strategies that I've employed in the past and noticed, that I think would be relevant at this point.
Thank you for that, Ruth. So ladies, this is the last questions for the question and answer period. And I would like you to take about 30 seconds in answering it each. And it's as role models and leaders in the field, what is the one piece of advice that you would give women who are coming up in STEM and just starting out their careers, particularly in terms of like choosing their specialization, their pathway, continuous learning? What would be that one piece of advice you would give them? And I will get Donna to kick us off on that.
Sure. I would say very quickly, make sure you're doing work that interests you, but remain nimble, right? See how that specialization is evolving and whether at some point you need to pivot to something else. And we've said this before, it's important to stay curious and have a learning mindset. Like your biggest asset is going to be your willingness to learn and find purpose in what you do. That's what's going to keep you interested.
All right. Thank you for that, Donna. And Janice, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give?
Maybe this will be more than one, maybe two. I would say, as Donna did, choose an area that interests you, an area that makes you feel really excited to learn more about. Continuous learning helps you keep abreast of what is current, and it also opens you up to new opportunities or additional opportunities. In the workplace, when you're adaptable, you automatically are a more attractive choice for new challenges, and you become a stronger professional when you're adaptable. So all of this will help shape your career path.
Thank you. Ruth.
Yes, I'd say two things. One, explore. You're young people going in there, young, explore areas. You want. This is a path you're going to be in possibly for a fairly long time. So you want to be in a path where you have the passion and the drive to actually contribute and to be your best. So explore and ensure that you actually find that right path. And then once you're there, I mean, one of the other things I'd say is just stay current, keep on learning, stay current.
Thank you for that, Ruth. And Camille, I'll get you to round us for us this question and answer.
I'll have some repeat. Find your purpose. Follow your dreams and your interests. You're in STEM, you can't go wrong. Experiment. Don't be afraid to try something new and different.
Wonderful. Thank you, Camille. Thank you, ladies. That was an awesome discussion session, and we're going to be opening up the Q&A. So thank you, Janice. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Camille. And I will be handing over back to Karen as we enter into the Q&A.
Thank you so much. Such amazing answers. I was taking so many notes because a lot of what you've said was transferable to many other fields. No other questions yet, so I don't know if any of our panelists would like to pose a question or add commentary to what has been said before.
I think I'll just want to just say one thing. Camille just said with STEM you can't go wrong, and it's true. And also, if you listen to a lot of us here, we've actually started off in STEM, or started off in engineering or maths or science, and we've branched off. But the background and the basic training that we've had from STEM, it stays with us. We just continue to build on that. And for anyone who's considering and trying to decide, if you're unsure, this is definitely one of the areas you'd want to try out. Remember, it said try different areas. This is one of the areas you want to try out because there's just such a satisfaction being in a result-oriented field that it's going to be you'll find that I'm going to say as high as maybe 7 times out of 10 you'd say, yeah, I found home, right? But I mean, it definitely is it's a challenging field. The challenges that a lot of us mention here are challenges that are in some shape or form found in other careers, but there's just such a great reward that I think working through this field that is not I really hope that the whole idea that this is something that is really rewarding at the end of the day, I really hope that idea is also very clear, and that there are mechanisms and strategies to overcoming a lot of the challenges that you'll find in this industry, just as there are in other industries.
Thank you. And now we have 2 questions. I'm so excited. Our first question is, and I'm going to just put this to anyone to answer, if you could do anything differently along your journey, what would it be? And this question is from Esther. Thank you, Esther.
I'll answer.
Okay.
I would have tried a lot more different things. I think, I've tried a lot of things, but I think more just to kind of round out my business career and experience. There are some areas in our business that I wish I was exposed to early on in career.
And I want to add to that. There is one area that I don't believe I have much experience in that I'm sorry I didn't explore further. The field of law. Working in regulations, I have more than a casual acquaintance with legal requirements. And I only wish I had some formal training in law. So who knows? There's still time. It's the only thing I do differently, explore some more on the legal aspect of things.
Thank you. The second question is, what do you love the most about your current role?
I think I'll go first with that. So my current role is that I implement solutions for companies that are managing capital projects. And I came into this role with the perspective of the company, the client. And I was able to bring that perspective to developers to say, okay, this is what clients need. And this is how we're going to develop these technology solutions for them, or this is how we're going to redesign their processes. And I love that I have that perspective, and that then I can bring that. It's my entire, what I've done throughout my entire career, I'm bringing to the role I have now. And that's really powerful, because when you go in front of a client, I don't have to do IT speak. I can speak their language, and they trust me with their processes, to know that, hey, there's somebody here who knows what she's talking about because she's done this. And so we can trust her to give the solutions that are really the best fit for us.
I was gonna add, for my part, I think the best thing about my role is having the ability to shape the future of young professionals. What I mean by that is that I'll give an example. There was a location that I worked with during a year. We had a massive turnover, and we brought in a number of engineers. And one of the key things was really being able to develop a succession plan and to develop those engineers so that they themselves would later on move into management. And, it's one of the things that I really am proud of. Whenever I go back to that location, when I used to go back, one of the things that I used to say is, do you know that everybody who worked from you who did that, there's one who's a production manager now, there's someone who's a technical manager. So they've all basically, just basically being able to help people who just come in to develop and realize or to get along the path to their potential is just one of the things that I'm really very, very proud of. There are many, but that one in particular, because it really influenced another generation to actually carry through something that you've begun. And they themselves, through the mechanisms that you use, actually refer back to, a lot of the things you do, plus of course, dealing with different generations, plus of course, new methods. And so that's one area I'm proud of.
Thank you. We're out of time now, but there are 2 questions in the chat box. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'm going to ask you really quickly, one person for the next question. We mentioned work-life balance. What do you currently do to achieve that balance? I think this was addressed earlier, but how do you make time for your loved ones but still excel at work?
It's not easy. And there are sacrifices that you have to make. I wish I had more work-life balance. That's one of the things that I wish if the question was asked earlier, you wish you had done differently. I wish I had taken more time, to just have vacations where I am just totally off the grid and just recharging. And so that's something I would change for sure. I don't think I did a really good job of it, because I'm a workaholic. So it's like, okay, the kids and my work, I really go hard at it. And it's something I really wish I had taken more time to kind of, step back sometimes and just breathe a little. Yeah. So not perfect, still a work in progress.
Thank you, Donna.
I'm sorry, I'll say something very quickly here, and I think we're all guilty of what Donna mentioned, that
We're all shaking our heads.
we're not very good at achieving this work-life balance. But I had a colleague who was ex-military, and he put things into fantastic perspective, and I wish I could have behaved like him. It would be time for us to leave the office for the day. Something would come in from the minister's office that was, as usual, very urgent and had to be done immediately. And he'd say, is anybody going to die? No, I'm going home. And then he would leave while the rest of us sat there. So I don't know if anybody else could get away with that attitude. But yeah, maybe some of us should try.
There's one other thing I want to add. That's really important, that we do have to be at home. One of the things that's really important, that we're present. And that's something I learned later on. I mean, if you talk to my daughters, I'm sure they'll tell you. And that's something that I was trained on, that when you're home, or for whatever short time it is, to be home and to be present. So I just wanted to add that to it as one of the mechanisms to deal with the work-life imbalance.
Thank you so much. We're almost out of time. There was one other question, but it was similar. Austin said, what will be your advice for young women interested in family life and career pursuits. I think your answer there in terms of finding time addresses it. So I would just like to thank everybody for your time, for your thought on these questions. Thank you so much. As I said before, a lot of your responses were very universal and apply to all fields, I think. So I really am grateful for sharing your lives here. And I want to express to my audience again, happy International Women's Day. Thank you, Rosemary Kimani-Dupuis, for moderating. Thank you, Femi, for being my research assistant, my tech backup here. And thank you, ladies, Camille, Donna, Ruth, and Janice for your time here.
I'll just say thank you, Karen, fellow panelists, Rosemary.
I'd just like to say it was really a pleasure. And if anything we said here today can really help young women, then yeah, that's really precious to me.
I'll just say happy International Women's Day and tell a woman in your life what she means to you.
I also would like to say thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, everyone else. So good to see you. And I, like Donna said, if what we said here has helped to influence even one person, I'd do it again.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing this space with me on this International Women's Day. It was my honor to moderate your panel, and I learned so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.